How perfect should we really communicate? Hello and welcome to Communication Psychology with me, Gerhard. I'm a psychologist from Hamburg, Germany, specialized in communication psychology in international multicultural contexts and in foreign languages. What's the backstory to this question? Many of us are afraid of speaking, especially in a foreign language. We somehow feel we are still at school. Somebody is going to judge us. Our grammar, our vocabulary, our pronunciation. Now, what's perfection in communication? We could go into many different areas here, but let's make a very important statement at the beginning. Perfect communication is not absolute. It depends on the situation. It depends on you. Who are you in that situation? What's your position, role? It depends on the other person, and it depends on the situation itself, on the overall context where the two of you or more meet. So we cannot assume there is an absolute way of perfect communication for all situations, for all people, and for all roles and functions that you yourself may have. It's a big difference if you communicate as a parent, a teacher, a colleague, a supervisor, and so on. And there are big differences between different cultures. How, for example, if you're a supervisor, you should communicate. If you're a supervisor, a boss in Russia, or in Sweden, or in Brazil, the expected way of communicating is quite different. So what is perfect for a Swedish boss will not be perfect behavior for a Russian boss. Now, in this small talk, let's focus on perfection as having a very formal style, like on television, like in your language classes at school. Because I observe many try to strive towards such an idea. They want to speak impeccably. And what they mean by impeccably is most often they adapt a style they somehow copied from school, like their language teacher spoke at school. Now, there are lots of potential problems with this. If you're speaking a foreign language, the problem is trying to impersonate the perfect pronunciation and like to aspire having a highly formal and very perfect style. Maybe that people may judge you more harshly. There are studies, I remember one made by the University of Birmingham, that if you give native speakers audio samples of foreigners making mistakes, they will be more harshly judged if they have the perfect British accent than if they have an identifiable foreign accent. So if you try to impersonate a perfect accent for you, perfect, a BBC accent or some standard American accent, the reaction will be that people will be more critical of you because you put yourself into the category of native speakers. So at the beginning, for them, it's not clear. They think you are a native speaker, and then you start making mistakes, and then they put you into the category of, oh, a native speaker, not well educated. Well, but for you, it would be much better as a foreigner to be put into a category, yes, he's a foreigner, but he's well educated. So this is one problem. In our native language, the same effect happens if you position yourself as a school teacher with a very formal style in an unsuitable situation, then you will create lots of problems. First, let's go back to our communication square from some videos before. So every time we communicate 4 aspects. One aspect is the official information. What's the content I'm going to transmit? Now, we may think often that the more neutral, the more professional, perfect the linguistic part, the better people will focus on the objective information. But what happens in many situations is that it may be even a hindrance. Of course, as I said, perfect communication depends on the situation. So, for example, if you're watching the news or you're going to a university lecture, you are expecting a certain style of being talked to. So in such a situation, maybe a more informal, imperfect style may distract from the message, Because what I observed over the years is that even news anchors in different countries, show masters, TV hosts, also started to move towards a more conversational style, more informal style, and also at universities. So having a very professional, dry, unattainable style of communication may also not be the norm in many professional settings today. Now, but if you are not in such a position and you try to communicate as perfectly as you can, how might you distract from this? Well, the next part of our communication square is, what are you telling about yourself? So how are you positioning yourself? And typically, we may want to show that, well, I'm highly educated, I'm part of the elite, and what the reaction to this may often be, that people may start to find flaws in you. Is he really so good? And then you start listening to them, not to the objective information, but waiting when the first mistake may appear. Because if they communicate that I'm perfect, the natural reaction will be, say, well, let's find out your imperfections. And we are no longer listening to the actual content. For example, there are people who make courses for how to have a perfect pronunciation in foreign languages, for example. And if you have this attitude that, copy me, I'm perfect, then the audience is just waiting when to show you wrong. Here I found one mistake. Also, on the relationship side, having a perfect style of communication or perfect formal style may say something about the relationship. For example, this person positions him or herself in the role of a teacher, for example. But you, as a listener, you will not accept this. You feel like talked down to. So you are expecting a symmetrical relationship. So we are on the same level, to colleagues, to friends. But by adopting a too formal style, the other person puts him or herself higher than you, which also will lead to a reaction against it. And if you observe, for example, in political debates on campaigns, there's also a trend of politicians coming down linguistically to a more conversational level. There are linguistic analysis of how in the last campaign Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris communicated. And one part of his success is probably also the way he speaks, because he has many imperfections that a formal advisor would counsel against. For example, it can be observed with Donald Trump that he often jumps from one topic to another. Now, from a formal standpoint, this is a bad discourse, but it's highly relatable to the overall audience, because that's exactly how we as humans communicate in our family and with friends. So, well, yes, his style of communication is highly problematic from a formal standpoint. If you are a public speaking trainer, probably you will not suggest speaking like Donald Trump. But on the relationship aspect, he was able, at least the election results show this, to create a rapport with his electorate. Whereas many other politicians, they have the typical politician speech. So they are not very relatable, and people understand it's them versus us. Good. Now, what's your experience with this? And if you have more concrete questions, please share with me. I won't suggest to make especially many mistakes and use bad grammar and so on. But you should ask yourself, am I trying to impersonate a school teacher or some very formal person when I speak to colleagues, clients, and customers? Probably they won't like this. And you may wonder why, with your impeccable style, you are not so successful as other people who don't have this perfect style. And in foreign languages, one pitfall, I believe, is that our style often depends on the content we consume. And for foreign language students, the most accessible information often is like, it's non-fiction, it's listening to the news. And then we automatically copy a certain style that is not relatable. So the antidote to this in any language is to consume artistic literature, like theater plays or novels where you can find dialogues. Also movies. Good. I hope this was useful. If you have questions, comments, please let them here below. I wish you much success with your communication and see you next week. Bye bye.